Three boys, one girl, one plan. What happened that night is just gruesome. Listen to the story.
It's a story that gained national attention in the mid-1990s and is now back in the spotlight.
It's one of the worst crimes I've ever read about.
So they really felt strongly that they needed to sacrifice a blonde-haired, blue-eyed virgin girl.
Do you know the movie Jennifer's Body? The horror film from 2009 starring Megan Fox has almost become a cult classic by now, even though it's clearly made for a teenage audience. Most of it takes place in a high school, and it has a lot of humor. It's also pretty brutal. Without spoiling too much, it's about an innocent schoolgirl who suddenly gains demonic powers after a fateful night. Why am I telling you this? Because the story we're talking about today is said to have inspired this modern horror classic. Today, we're talking about the story of Elyse Pahler. It's 1995, and in the small town of Arroyo Grande, California, absolutely nothing is going on. The nearest bigger city, San Luis Obispo, isn't far away, but even there, only a little more than 40,000 people live. Especially for teenagers, who naturally want to explore the world and be more independent, life in Arroyo Grande must have been pretty boring. But not for the three friends Royce Casey, Joseph Joe Fiorella, and Jacob Dalishmut. The boys are between 14 and 16 years old and are known for their rebellious behavior. All three of them have been kicked out of school. Royce now goes to a special school, Joe is homeschooled, and Jacob goes to a different school. In short, things are not going well for the three friends. What reasons there might be for this, or how things are at home, sadly isn't known. But we do know how the boys spend their time and try to distract themselves. What brings Royce, Joe, and Jacob together more than anything else is their love for death metal. The boys also play instruments themselves and want to be as good as their idols. They form their own band and call themselves Hatred. The three friends hang out in their rehearsal space almost all the time, but practicing their instruments slowly becomes less important. Instead, the boys smoke marijuana together and supposedly take other substances like mushrooms. And of course, they talk about their favorite bands and albums. Royce, Joe, and Jacob become especially fascinated with the lyrics of some metal songs. Joe in particular takes the music very seriously. One day, he asks his friend Dalishmut what it would be like to sacrifice a virgin, and if Dalishmut would join him. According to Dalishmut, he didn't think much of it and kind of agreed without taking it seriously. But Joe actually meant it. The song that had the biggest impact on Joe was by the band Slayer, and it's called Dead Skin Mask. The lyrics are about the serial killer Ed Gein. They say, "Dance with the dead in my dreams. Listen to their hallowed screams. The dead have taken my soul. Temptation's lost all control." On July 22, 1995, the six-member Pahler family from Arroyo Grande is spending a quiet evening together. That's something the Pahlers do regularly. The kids are already teenagers, but the family is very close. Their shared faith also brings them together, and ending the evening as a family is part of that. 15-year-old Elyse is lying on the couch with her parents, her two sisters, and her brother. The Pahlers are enjoying a cozy movie night, watching an old Western film, Pale Rider with Clint Eastwood. A little after 9 p.m., the family's phone rings. Elyse answers and has a short conversation. Right after she hangs up around 9:15 p.m., she says she's tired and going to bed. Neither her parents nor her siblings think anything of it. Only her father has a strange feeling, like his daughter is up to something, but he brushes the thought aside. They wish Elyse good night, and little by little the house becomes quiet. But as you can probably guess, Elyse doesn't go to sleep. Instead, she does what many teenagers try at some point. She sneaks out of the house at night. The call she got during the movie came from Joe, Jacob, and Royce. Elyse still knows them from school, from before the three got expelled. The boys had invited her to hang out and smoke weed with them. She was known to be curious and open to trying new things, so a secret joint late at night probably sounded tempting to her. In her free time, Elyse loved clothes. Fashion was her big hobby, and she could even imagine working in that field one day. But she also loved to sing and dance, and as a creative girl, she was interested in anything related to art. It was a way for her to express herself. She often encouraged her friends to stick with their hobbies and passions, and to follow their dreams and goals. Elyse was 15 years old, with blonde hair and blue eyes, and that's exactly why the three boys had chosen her. They also believed that Elyse was still a virgin. Joe in particular had been watching her closely in the weeks before, sometimes even following her. The four of them met not far from Elyse's home, in an area called Nipomo Mesa, near the edge of a quiet forest. At first, everything went just as relaxed as Elyse probably imagined. The boys brought something to smoke, and for about 15 to 20 minutes, the teens just sat around together. But then, suddenly, Jacob stepped behind Elyse and wrapped his belt around her neck to choke her. Even though Elyse was probably a little high, she fought back immediately. But she was alone, and they were three. While Jacob held her in a chokehold with his belt, Joe pulled out a knife and stabbed her directly in the throat. After that, Joe passed the knife to his two friends. Taking turns, the boys stabbed Elyse again and again. Elyse's legs gave out, and she fell to the ground. Later, the boys would say that Elyse screamed for her mom, and then for God. They stomped on her throat to silence her. Then they dragged her body to a small grassy area, where Elyse Pahler bled out. Afterward, Royce, Joe, and Jacob dug a shallow grave and hid Elyse's body there. Her body would remain there for months. For the time being, Joe, Royce, and Jacob got away with it. Of course, Elyse's parents noticed on the morning of July 23rd that their 15-year-old daughter was gone and immediately called the police. The police followed standard procedures and opened a case, but they didn't believe that Elyse had been the victim of a crime. To them, Elyse Pahler was just another runaway case. It wasn't until the spring of 1996 that Royce Casey began to feel more and more guilty. He made a confession and told a priest about the murder of Elyse. Apparently, he had turned to the Christian faith by then. The priest convinced him to turn himself into the police, and that's exactly what Royce did on March 14, 1996. He also told them about the other two boys, Joe and Jacob, who were then questioned by the police. It didn't take long before all three confessed to the murder of Elyse Pahler. Soon after, the police found her body. Decomposition was already so advanced that she could only be identified by her dental records and a plastic bracelet with red hearts, something she always wore. Her body was too badly decomposed for a full autopsy. It was still visible that her pants had been removed. The boys gave different stories about whether they abused Elyse after her death, but police and prosecutors believed that they did. When asked about their motive, the boys gave a shocking answer. Royce told a police officer that Elyse had been sacrificed to the devil. The three of them had wanted to offer Elyse to Satan so he would help them with their music careers. The boys used lyrics from their favorite bands as a direct reference, and in a way, as inspiration for the murder of Elyse. How much they truly believed that Satan existed and would accept a human sacrifice is impossible to know. But during their police interviews, they must have told the story in a convincing way, because to this day, that is considered the official motive for the murder. When Royce, Joe, and Jacob went to court, they stayed silent. They were convicted based only on what they had said during their police interviews. Even though all three were still underage at the time of the trial, they were sentenced under adult criminal law. They received life sentences, which means at least 25 years in prison. If you've been doing the math in your head, you've probably figured out that this time has already passed. But Royce, Jacob, and Joe, who are now all in their 40s, are still not free. They remain in separate prisons to this day. So far, none of their parole requests have been approved. Royce in particular continues to try for parole, but every one of his attempts has been denied so far. Five years after the murder of the young student, something else happened in the year 2000. Elyse Pahler's family tried to sue the metal band Slayer. If you don't know Slayer, I mentioned them briefly at the beginning. They are, or were, a pretty big thrash metal band. They were the band that inspired Joe, Jacob, and Royce to start their own band, Hatred. And according to the Pahlers, Slayer also inspired the murder of Elyse. But the family didn't just want to hold Slayer accountable. They also went after music distributors who worked with the band and sold Slayer's albums. Elyse's family believed that Slayer's often graphic and controversial lyrics served as inspiration for the murder. In the mid-90s, Slayer's target audience was no longer just hardcore metal fans. The band was clearly trying to reach younger fans too, helped by music channels like MTV, which became famous around this time. The Pahler family saw this marketing strategy as extremely reckless. They believed that lyrics about violence and extreme acts should never have been marketed directly to teenagers. In the legal complaint, it actually said, "The distribution and marketing of this obscene and harmful material to male youths constitutes aiding and abetting the criminal acts described in this complaint." The material refers to Slayer's music. But the family went even further. The complaint also stated that none of the cruel acts committed against Elyse Marie Pahler would have happened without Slayer's intentional marketing strategy. So the big question was, does the metal band Slayer share part of the blame for the murder of Elyse? No. That was decided separately by two judges, who each dismissed a lawsuit filed by the Pahler family against the band Slayer and their music distributors. There was no legal way to hold Slayer responsible for Elyse's death. Violence, Satanism, and other controversial topics aren't just found in Slayer's music. They're also present in books, movies, TV shows, news articles, and more. And in a country that protects the right to free creative expression, you can't simply ban those themes from art. One of Elyse's killers, Jacob, even said in a prison interview that the music didn't really have anything to do with Elyse's murder. He said the music was destructive, yes, but in the end, Elyse died mostly because Joe was obsessed with her. And because his friends, Royce and Jacob, helped him carry out the crime. I know many of you are probably wondering about the lawsuit filed by Elyse's parents, and might think it was extreme or overly sensitive. And yes, maybe it was from an objective point of view. But it's important to remember who filed it. A mother and a father whose daughter was killed with unimaginable violence. Parents who, even after Elyse's murder, had to stay strong for their 3 other children, raising them and somehow putting food on the table. Elyse's father had to give up his job for several years after the murder and needed psychological treatment. The family lost their home and had to rely on social welfare for a time, all while trying to process the brutal loss of their daughter. The Pahlers always made it clear that they didn't want to censor or ban Slayer. If it were up to them, the band could continue making and performing their music, just not in a way that targets kids. But even back in 2000, a lawsuit based on that idea had no real chance of success. And today, in the age of digital media and streaming platforms, something like that would be unthinkable. In the end, this brings us to a broader topic: media literacy. Kids need to learn how to deal with fiction in a thoughtful and sensitive way, whether it's books, films, or song lyrics. That's especially true if a child is going through a difficult time emotionally. And that brings us to the end of today's video. Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. I think when it comes to music and lyrics, most of us probably agree. It's really not that different from the never-ending debate about violent video games. But if you see it differently, or think content like this should be handled more critically, let us know in the comments. Big thanks again for all your comments and likes. You know they help the channel a lot. If you'd like, feel free to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss a new video. Here you can find another just gripping case. Click on it. Until then, see you soon. Stay safe.